Welcome back to another episode of Life in the Stands podcast. We have Jake and Zach on the podcast today. We're excited to jump into some of the worst contracts in the NFL and the NBA right now. Moves that were not very smart for those teams to make, and we are all laughing at them now for it. Before we jump into that, though, I want to thank everyone for watching and listening. Remember to like and subscribe on whatever platform you're on. And with that, you can't talk about bad contracts unless you bring up Deshaun Watson. And I saw some statistics on Deshaun Watson so far this year. He has not played an opposing pass defense ranked better than 19th through 5 games. And he is the worst modern NFL QB in history, according to his QBR and a couple other statistics. So obviously, the Browns aren't going to bench him at this point. They can't bench him. They can't trade him. It may be the worst contract in NFL history at this point. Like it's like 5 year, 230 million guaranteed or something like that. And I just can't wait to watch him play the Chiefs pass defense, the Steelers twice, the Ravens twice. Like if Deshaun Watson stays as the starting QB the whole season, it'll be a train wreck, but it'll be a beautiful train wreck for anyone but a Browns fan.
Yeah, it's it's not just the worst contract in honestly NFL history. It's the worst management situation as well because you can't bench him like you said. So not even that. Let's add on to that. They're kicking themselves in the ass for letting Baker Mayfield go.
Oh,
Like there was no need to make that move. Dude made the playoffs with Tampa in his first year. Now, granted, it was a Super Bowl winning team, so you got to think about that. But they're kicking themselves, and I don't know where they can even go from here other than maybe try and trade him. But the cap hit is just crazy regardless.
yeah. It's like over $100 million cap hit, whether you trade him or release him. And that's less than what Baker Mayfield's entire contract is. So
Yep. Yeah, and we're actually going to keep it with the Browns now that we're on the Brown slander here. Um, so
Steelers fans love
Jerry,
this episode. Woo! Let's go.
yeah, of course you do. But no, Jerry Jeudy signed a contract extension with the Cleveland Browns as soon as he got traded from the Broncos. We all understand that he was unhappy playing for the Broncos. He thought he should have got a lot more touches and whatever else. Cortland Sutton was the guy out there, still is the guy out there. Um, the point I'm going to get across with this one is if he doesn't turn into a superstar, now we just talked about how Deshaun Watson's so bad, which means that's going to reflect on the rest of the team. Look at Amari Cooper right now.
Yeah.
Um, and he's their number one for sure. He's on the trade market. Jerry Jeudy might get his opportunities later in the year, but if he doesn't turn into a star at any point in this year, like he was supposed to be, the way that they thought about him when they extended him, they might have to think about releasing him. And even if they do that, it's still a $9 million cap hit or more,
Mm.
depending on the date that they release him or even trade him. And trading at that point becomes difficult, as we all know. As your value goes down, it's just you're worth a bag of chips at that point. So the
Yeah.
Cleveland Browns are just in shambles, my guy.
Yeah. It's a little tough. And I am looking at this contract, and I mean, it's not as bad as it could be because I'm looking at it here. So it's 41 million guaranteed at signing. It's an average annual at 17 and a half. I mean, that's half of what the top end receivers are making now, right? So with a couple of those new contracts with Justin Jefferson, Amon St. Brown, Ayuk, CD, like it maybe doesn't look quite as bad, but that guaranteed number is like that money that's guaranteed is still a really big number. And like you're saying, it's also a 3 year deal. So if he doesn't show up this year, that contract immediately looks way worse. And again, you can't do anything with it because teams aren't going to want to pick it up. So definitely rough on all sides there. Let's move away from the Browns. We'll give Browns fans just a little bit of breathing room. We'll go to one of our favorite other teams to joke about on this podcast, the Jaguars.
Here we go.
Yeah. This won't be the first time, and I'm sure it will not be the last time that we talk about Trevor Lawrence's contract on this podcast because Trevor Lawrence is making a 5 year, $275 million contract. Patrick Mahomes makes 10-year, 500 million. Trevor Lawrence has a higher annual value to his contract than Patrick Mahomes does. I don't I don't I don't know how like part of me wants to just keep talking and say a lot and part of me wants to shut up and say nothing.
Yeah, if I'm being honest, I don't have any more opinions on this other than it's just absolute garbage. And again, we questioned it at the time of the signing, um, a lot more than we did the Tua signing, which also looks pretty bad right
Oh
now.
yeah, geez.
Um,
Person
health
too early.
wise, not talent wise,
Yeah.
health wise.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, honestly, the Jaguars have a lot going on. Um, they thought they could bring in like Gabe Davis, Christian Kirk's still there. They wanted to get rid of Calvin Ridley. Like that wasn't a great target for Trevor Lawrence last year, so they didn't give him any more help. They
Oh,
lost help.
I mean, thank
Um,
goodness they drafted Brian Thomas Jr. because he's like the
yeah,
only thing keeping that offense afloat right now. And honestly, I was wrong about that one because I didn't think he was going to be that great. I thought Neighbors was more of the guy at LSU. It's kind of looking like Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. are going to be like Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase were coming out of LSU.
yeah, that's a great
Holy cow!
comparison. I'd
Holy
agree
cow!
with that. And now like Travis Etienne's not looking the best.
Mm-mm.
Um, Tank looks much better than he does. So
Yeah,
now it's
Tank
like
Bigsby looks good too. Yeah,
you have other question marks with that team and that whole franchise. And there's no way of them turning it around.
yeah. Even Doug Peterson, right? Like he's probably like if they don't make the playoffs this year, he's probably out, right? Like
In a division that's kind of weak right now, it's just the Texans. And the Texans aren't exactly winning every game, so it's definitely up in the air still.
right. Yeah, it's a side
Um,
conversation, but the Texans have definitely not been like the juggernaut that we thought they were going to be. They're figuring it out a little bit still. So, I mean, there's definitely like the AFC is kind of tough because, I mean, like you can have a little bit of that conversation where it's like, are you going to find the top half of the league quality QB every day? No. Is Trevor Lawrence a top 20 QB in the NFL? Yeah, probably. But like you can like I was almost going to compare that to Dak's contract because at least with Dak like there's playoff wins, there's far more production, there's MVP looks like and it's consistent. There hasn't been downturns, like Dak has been pretty consistently like lots of touchdowns, lots of yards, high completion percentage, like whatever. You can't like it's really hard to justify that kind of argument where with Dak you're like you're not going to find another top 5, top 7 QB, pay the guy. With Trevor Lawrence, it's like, ooh, like maybe you pay him, but not that much.
yeah,
Not
and
that
one
much.
last comment here that I would at least like to talk about a little bit is it's a different situation when you look at what the Bengals are doing compared to what the Jaguars are doing. Like Joe Burrow is at least producing while they're losing. Like that offense is doing what they're supposed to do. When you're losing games because you can't score, that's a different story.
Very different story. Very different story. Speaking of another QB bender,
Yeah, let's go to Daniel Jones. We all know how bad this contract is. And I know he just had a win against the Seahawks as of late, but that doesn't change my opinion at all of him. You sign a 4-year deal worth 160 million. Not sure how much guaranteed if you'd like to find that real quick for me, but had the knee injury, missed all of last year basically. Um, a rotation of quarterbacks there. I'm not even sure if Dayball's the right coach for them at this point. And you're looking at the number, I'd imagine.
$36 million signing bonus,
Yep.
92 million guaranteed.
Yep. And to be honest with you, Malik Neighbors is the only one that's saving him at all in like being average.
Yep.
Not great. He's just average at this point. And if you feel like you have to move on from him after this year, and again, worst case scenario, you have to release him because nobody wants him. That's still over a $19 million cap hit. So you are still screwed for at least the next year or two.
Yep.
Um, and in that rebuild, maybe you can find a team to trade him to get some kind of draft compensation, but you're still getting hit by that big contract you decide to give him.
Yeah. I mean, it's not Deshaun Watson's cap hit, but it's significant. I mean, yeah, that's not easy to work around when you're trying to build an NFL team. And um, the whole quarterback market just, it's overvalued.
Yeah.
It's overvalued. I think
And
it's a reset.
looking at this upcoming draft class between Bo Nix, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, they all had great weeks last week. Like they are showing promise that they're at least going to be like top half quarterbacks in the league, which again pushes guys like Trevor Lawrence, Tua, all those guys on the
Yeah.
back end
Yeah.
without jobs or being backup quarterbacks,
Yeah.
whatever it is. You have plenty of guys coming up next year that
Yep.
are there for your spot as well. Like you can talk about
Quinn
Cam Ward.
Ewers, Cam Ward. Shador
Like
Sanders. As much as
there's
we
so
hear about
much.
Shador Sanders, but he's going to get drafted and he's going to probably start as a rookie.
But
Um,
going back to your point, you're talking about those contracts being overvalued. Just go to the draft at this point. There's plenty of
seriously,
guys you can develop and everything else.
seriously, yeah. And look at Drake May. Drake May is going to start this week too. But let's transition into some of the worst NBA contracts right now. NBA season is just a little bit away now at this point. There's already some preseason games starting, and it'll be interesting to see how this season plays out. But I'm going to start with the other kind of like given bad contract in the NBA. Like in the NFL, it's like holy cow! Like Deshaun Watson's contract is horrible. That's awful. It makes me have feelings that I don't want to share in public. But on the flip side, in the NBA, Bradley Beal has a similar situation. Not quite as bad, not nearly as bad, I'd say, but definitely still like way overvalued for a contract for where he's at in his age 33 season. I think he's going to be. And it's like almost fully guaranteed for him too. So when you look at the guys across the league making super maxes, and now those are guys like Embiid, Jokic, uh, I mean, all the
Steph
guys you can
getting the
think of.
extensions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Steph got the big extension. LeBron got the big extension. You got people like Zion making max contracts, I guess, like Damian Lillard, Giannis. Like, I don't know. Like, that Beal one just seems to be one of the lowest on the totem pole of those big contracts. Even Cat
Yeah.
looks better.
Yeah. So, and people think that's a bad contract. I think people need to pump the brakes on Cat a little bit. I know he's a little bit of a softie, um, especially to me. Like I will call him a softie. I don't care.
I'd
But
still take that over the Bradley Beal contract, though, because he plays.
exactly. Exactly. So I think what you have to look at as well is the fact that the Wizards are not exactly in one of those top places that are popular free agency destinations. So when you get a guy like Bradley Beal, you're almost forced to like sign him just to kind of keep him there in case you can keep building on it. Um, and they did well. Like for a while, they had Oubre and Wall with Gortat and some other guys on that team a long time ago.
Yeah.
And he just kind of like stayed there and they couldn't find another way after John Wall kind of fell apart. Um, and then the other thought of this is like the only way this contract looks good is if the Suns win it all, really. And
Mhm.
I will say Kendrick Perkins, I believe today mentioned that he has them as the dark horse to win. So if that actually can happen, I won't say a damn thing about his contract,
Right.
especially if he's a part of it. Like stay healthy, be a part of it. If he's a
Yeah.
part of it and they win it all, like I will not have a problem with it, but it's not looking like it to me.
Right. Right.
There's too much talent in that Western Conference. It's like the AFC of football, basically.
Mhm.
Um, so I just, it's a little sketch, but I understand why they signed him. Um, but I want to go back to the Wizards because Jordan Poole was actually my worst contract or one of my worst contracts.
Mm.
So they won the championship, the NBA Finals with the Warriors, and Jordan Poole talking all this shit like Draymond, you're in Steph Curry's backpack, blah blah blah, and that's what got him hit. You talk all that trash just to get that big contract to go to the Wizards and get benched last year. Not even just play and suck, which he did. He played and he sucked. He got benched and still sucked. Like that didn't even fire him up to do good. He basically was like, I got my money, I got my chip, I'm cool. So
Yeah,
that's one of the worst contracts to me.
I agree.
And
How does that
it's
feel coming from like a Michigan guy? Because he's out of Michigan, right?
yeah, well, I didn't think he was going to be that good in the pros anyway. So for what he did with the Warriors, like I was surprised and I was happy for him.
Yeah.
But now I'm just kind of like, okay, he had his little 1 to 2 year prime in a system where you shoot a shit ton of threes. Steph Curry got hurt the year before they won, which
Right.
allowed him to get some experience and be able to get some kind of confidence in that shooting scheme. So like the fit was good. The Wizards are just god awful, so maybe that's what it
Yeah.
is.
Well, it
But
just shows too that he's not the guy that can actually carry the team, right? And I think the Wizards were thinking after those 2 years with Steph Curry being out and then him being a major part of that finals run, I think the Wizards thought they were getting a guy that wasn't going to replace Bradley Beal, but was at least going to keep them afloat. You know, if you have him and Kuzma on a roster, like you're thinking at least you can win some games, but it hasn't worked out like that, and he does not look like that kind of player.
yeah, and I don't think that's a bad idea either. Like I didn't think it was a terrible decision, if I'm being
Mm-hmm.
honest, because Kuzma was there and Bradley Beal was still kind of there until you traded him last year. So
Right.
like you thought you had a chance to at least try and squeeze into the play-in. That's just not how it worked.
Yeah, yeah. Moving on though, let's go to the next contract here. This is a player that we've actually gone back and forth a little bit on this podcast because I think you think a little bit more highly of him than I do. Zach LaVine. So Zach LaVine has a 4-year, $178 million contract with the Bulls. And we've talked about it before. It's not that I don't think he's a good player. I've just never really seen him impact winning like significantly. And, like in terms of getting rid of his contract, offloading him, trading him, whatever, I think, there's a lot of trade talk around Zach LaVine, and there's a reason it didn't happen. And it's because teams that are winning teams don't think that that contract value actually matches up to the contributions he'd make to winning.
I agree. Surprisingly enough, I agree. I
Yeah.
think my problem with it now is his injuries. So you don't want to trade for that contract if he's just going to be hurt all the time. I don't think he's had a healthy season over the last 3 years. We know
Yep.
what he can do when he plays. Like he can put up 30. If he goes to a championship winning team, I don't think he is going to be like the main focus like he is with Chicago. So he's not going to score the 30, but I think he could be a third like superstar, um,
Yeah.
which depending on what team you are, I think it might be worth it. If you're one piece away and he ends up being cheap somehow, some way, it's not a bad idea. I just don't know
Yeah.
what team would want to take that risk
Yeah.
or what team is close enough to take that risk. I think the only team I would have thought of is the Kings, and they got DeRozan.
Right.
That was a much better risk, in my opinion, because he's still going to do what he does.
And he plays.
Yes.
And he's gonna play. Yeah. So I'm with you that. And like yeah, it depends on what kind of trade compensation it would take to get Levine. And I agree. Like I think he could be a good third option or like an incredible fourth.
Yeah,
You know,
I agree.
but yeah, interesting contract there.
Yeah, let's go to one of the last contracts we have, if not the last contract we have. Um, I thought this was going to be a good one as well. And then looking into last year, I know there was a little bit of drama with the coaching staff, um, probably being what the most winning team in basketball, and the dude still got fired, and Doc Rivers came in. We're going to talk about Damian Lillard and his 4-year, $207.3 million contract because he is 34 years old. He was inconsistent last year, and he's only getting older. Um, and they didn't really do too much else to their team. Like they're still building around Giannis. At this point, Dame is just there to catch and shoot for Giannis rather than be the Dame Lillard we know of. So at that point, why are you paying over 200 million for a catch and shoot guy when you could have got yourself a Buddy Hield this past year who just went to the Warriors?
For
So,
cheap,
you know,
for real cheap.
yeah.
Yeah. And before you wrap it up with some MLB player of the week stuff, what I'd say about that contract is yeah, like you have a glorified catch and shoot guy now who's getting older, and it's another one of those contracts that you're never going to be able to offload because no team at this point is going to look at Dame Lillard over the last couple of years and say, yeah, we'll figure that out. It's not going to happen. And I think it was significant too. Part of the reason for his inconsistent play, he didn't want to go to Milwaukee, right? Like he wanted to go to the Heat. He wanted to go, you know, somewhere south, tropical, whatever.
Well, the thing is to me is that I think he still wanted to be like at least like a 1A, 1B kind of option on a team instead of being the glorified second option because Giannis will touch the ball every time. Um,
Right.
whereas if you play with a guy like Jimmy Butler, I think he's a lot more unselfish. That team plays like a team. It's not a whole lot of ISO basketball. You saw when Doc Rivers coached the Sixers, it was a lot of isolation movements, and like rather than like ball movement, screening. Um, if you talk about the Miami Heat, Duncan Robinson and his back cuts and
Yeah.
motioning out, like there's just like
Yeah.
little things that were not involved in Doc Rivers' system, and now you have to deal with that. And I just don't think that's what's going to be the best fit for him. I don't even know if he'd be in a championship position if he was on the Heat. For how crazy that sounds, I know they made the finals a couple of times just with Jimmy and Bam. Um, but him wanting to be the number one option, I think, is still selfish as well for how old he's getting at this point.
Yeah. The Heat is an interesting whole other side conversation because of the comments Pat Riley made. About like they feel like their team has always been competitive the last couple of years. They just haven't been healthy down the stretch. So they're just waiting to actually see their team healthy and all together. And it's like part of that I see, part of it I don't. But let's wrap it up with some MLB talk. Bender's going to hit us with a player of the week here since the Phillies lost. So this is his punishment.
Yeah, you're an ass. But the Phillies lost to the New York Mets in 4 games in New York. Game 4 was in New York. They closed it out. And the guy that I'm going to give credit to here is Francisco Lindor. He was the one that hit the grand slam to put them up and basically clinch that game for them in the clinching moments of the series. And I do like him as a player. Obviously, you don't like to see your own team lose, but I do like him as a player, and I think he deserves a little bit more shine, especially since you're the bottom of New York's priorities when it comes to them or the Yankees. And especially when it came to us last week because we made a thumbnail that had the Knicks and the Yankees and completely forgot to mention the Mets. So our apologies there. That's also a part of my punishment because I do not like to apologize for that kind of thing. But no, the Grand Slam's great if you can do it anytime, and he
Yep.
did it in the playoffs.
Yep. Yeah. In the weightiest moments. So got to give credit. And yeah, I mean, when we sat here last week, we talked about Phillies Yankees World Series and how much hype would be around that. And now we're sitting here talking about the possibility of a Mets Yankees World Series, which might even have more hype around it, honestly, if we got to that point. So really exciting to see how the rest of those series play out in the MLB playoffs. Excited for the NBA season to start and excited for Deshaun Watson to go up against real pass defenses. Remember to like and subscribe to whatever platform you're listening on. We appreciate all the listening and support, and we'll catch you on the next episode.